The cold October rain hammered down on the narrow Seoul street like bullets from the sky. Kim Tae pulled his torn military jacket tighter around his thin body as he sat against the cold brick wall of the 7-Eleven store. The bright neon lights from inside cast strange shadows on his weathered face. His stomach growled loudly, reminding him he had not eaten anything real in 2 days. People walked past him quickly, their expensive shoes splashing through puddles as they hurried to escape the rain. Most did not even look at him. Some stared for a second, then looked away with disgust or fear in their eyes. Tae was used to this by now. 3 years on the streets had taught him that most people saw homeless veterans as dangerous or crazy. The faded patch on his jacket read, Rock Army Engineering Corps, but the letters were so worn you could barely read them. Tae touched it gently, with his dirty fingers. Once that patch had meant something. Once people had respected him for wearing it. Now it was just another reason for them to cross the street when they saw him coming. A black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the curb right in front of the store. The engine was so quiet, Tae almost did not notice it. Rich people cars always sounded different than the old buses and trucks that usually came down this street. The driver stayed inside, but Tae could see his outline through the dark glass. The back door opened, and a man stepped out into the rain. He was tall and built like a mountain, wearing an expensive black coat that probably cost more than Tae had seen in months. Even in the dim streetlight, Tae recognized the face immediately. Everyone in Korea knew Park Min, the famous actor who starred in all those action movies about soldiers and heroes. Park Min looked around the street for a moment, then his eyes landed on Tae sitting against the wall. Most celebrities would have looked away quickly, or told their driver to move the car. Instead, Park Min walked straight toward him, not caring that his expensive shoes were getting soaked in the dirty puddles. Tae felt his heart beating faster. He had asked thousands of people for help over the past 3 years. Most ignored him completely. Some threw coins at him like he was a dog begging for scraps. A few had been kind, but they always hurried away after giving him a few dollars. Like being near him might somehow rub off on them. "Sir," Tae said in a voice that was barely louder than a whisper. His throat was dry and scratchy from sleeping outside in the cold air. "Can you spare $1? I have not eaten in 2 days." What happened next shocked not just Tae, but everyone else on the street who was watching. Park Min did not reach for his wallet. He did not drop coins into Tae's worn baseball cap. Instead, the famous actor did something that no one expected. Park Min knelt down in the dirty rainwater right next to Tae. His expensive coat soaked up the filthy street water, but he did not seem to care at all. He looked directly into Tae's eyes, not with pity or disgust, but with genuine interest and respect. "What's your story, soldier?" Park Min asked quietly. Tae's eyes filled with tears that mixed with the rain on his face. No one had called him soldier in 3 years. No one had asked about his story. Most people acted like homeless people did not have stories at all, like they had always been sitting on street corners begging for money. The words came pouring out of Tae like water through a broken dam. He told Park Min about his 5 years serving in Afghanistan with the Korean Army. He talked about the friends he had lost to roadside bombs and sniper fire. He explained how he had developed new techniques for finding and disarming hidden explosives that had saved hundreds of lives. He described the night when everything changed. His unit had been clearing mines from a village school when the explosion happened. Tae had thrown himself on top of a young Afghan girl to protect her from the blast. The explosion had damaged his hearing and given him terrible headaches that never went away. But the little girl had lived. When Tae came back to Korea, the headaches got worse. He could not sleep at night because of the nightmares. The military doctors gave him pills that made him feel like a zombie during the day. He lost his job because he could not concentrate. His wife left him because she said he was not the same person who had gone to war. Soon the pills were not enough to stop the pain in his head and his heart. He started drinking to make the memories go away. The drinking led to more problems. Eventually he lost his apartment and ended up on the streets with nothing but his old military jacket and the memories that would not leave him alone. Park Min listened to every word without interrupting. When Tae finished talking, they sat together, in silence for a long moment, while the rain continued to fall around them. Finally, Park Min reached into his coat pocket. But instead of pulling out money, he took out a small plastic card. "Tomorrow, Aero 800 hours," Park Min said as he handed Tae the card. "Yongsan Base, ask for Colonel Lee." The card was a secure military ID that would get Tae through the gates of the most important army base in Seoul. Tae stared at it in disbelief, not understanding what was happening or why this famous actor was helping him in such an unusual way. The elevator went down much deeper than Kim Tae thought was possible. The numbers on the display kept going. Basement level 5, 6, 7, 8. His ears popped from the pressure as they descended into the earth beneath Yongsan Base. The military ID card Park Min had given him was still warm in his pocket, and Tae kept touching it to make sure this was not all a strange dream. Colonel Lee Sung was waiting for him when the elevator doors finally opened. She was a small woman with short gray hair and eyes that looked like they had seen too many secrets. Her uniform was perfectly pressed and covered with ribbons and medals that Tae did not recognize. When she shook his hand, her grip was stronger than most men he had known in the army. "Follow me, Sergeant Kim," she said in a voice that expected to be obeyed immediately. "And prepare yourself for something that will change everything you thought you knew about the world." They walked through corridors that looked nothing like the rest of the military base above ground. The walls were made of some kind of metal that seemed to glow with its own light. Strange symbols were carved into the ceiling, and the air hummed with electricity that made the hair on Tae's arms stand up. Soldiers in black uniforms stood guard at every door, but their weapons looked different from anything Tae had ever seen. 3 months ago," Colonel Lee said as they walked, "our deep space monitoring stations picked up a signal. At first we thought it was just radio noise from a distant star. Then our computers translated it into perfect Korean. They stopped in front of a massive door that was at least 3 meters tall and made of the same glowing metal as the walls." Colonel Lee placed her hand on a scanner, and the door split open with a soft hissing sound. The room beyond was enormous, with a ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness above them. In the center of the room was something that made Tae's brain struggle to understand what he was seeing. It looked like a 3-dimensional movie screen, but the images floating inside it were so real, he felt like he could reach out and touch them. Strange creatures with long arms and large heads were moving around inside the display, working on machines that defied every law of physics Tae remembered from school. "They call themselves the Kepler," Colonel Lee explained, watching Tae's shocked expression. "They have been watching Earth since 1950 during the Korean War. They were amazed by what they saw here." Tae tore his eyes away from the incredible display to look at the colonel. "What do you mean, amazed?" "Think about it, Sergeant. The Korean War was fought between forces that were completely unequal. The North had massive support from China and Russia. The South had almost nothing at the beginning. American and UN forces were outnumbered and outgunned most of the time. By every military rule in the book, the war should have been over in a few weeks." Colonel Lee walked closer to the holographic display and pointed at images of what looked like spaceships floating in a strange purple cloud. But something incredible happened instead. Korean and UN forces learned to fight smarter, not harder. They used the mountains and terrain as weapons. They built effective defenses out of rocks and mud. They turned empty rice paddies into deadly traps for enemy tanks. The images in the display changed to show what looked like a massive space battle. Alien ships with sleek designs were being destroyed by something Tae could not see clearly. Explosions plumed like flowers across the darkness of space, and debris scattered in all directions. "The Kepler have fought wars across the galaxy for thousands of years," Colonel Lee continued. "They have technology that can destroy planets and reshape stars, but they keep losing battles to enemies who use simple, primitive tactics. They realized that humans, especially Koreans, have a special gift." "What kind of gift?" Tae asked, still staring at the incredible scenes playing out in the holographic display. "The ability to create effective solutions with almost no resources. The talent to survive and win when everything is stacked against you. The Kepler have studied our military history for 70 years. They are fascinated by how Korean forces held the line at Busan with broken equipment and determination, how UN forces pushed back from certain defeat using creativity instead of firepower." The display changed again, showing what looked like a single spaceship trapped inside a swirling, storm of dark energy. Lightning bolts the size of mountains crashed around the vessel, and strange tentacles of shadow reached out to grab it. Every few seconds, smaller ships would fly into the storm to attempt a rescue, only to be torn apart or simply disappear into the darkness. Their most advanced research ship is trapped in what they call a void storm, Colonel Lee said quietly. It is stuck in a place where normal space and time do not work properly. Every high-tech rescue attempt they have tried has failed. Their computers, their energy weapons, their force fields, nothing works against this enemy. Tay watched as another rescue ship dissolved into nothing when it touched the edge of the dark storm. What does this have to do with me? I am just a homeless veteran who knows how to disarm bombs. Colonel Lee turned to look at him directly, and for the first time since he had met her, she smiled. That is exactly why they need you, Sergeant. They need someone who learned to survive with nothing. Someone who can look at an impossible situation and find a solution that does not depend on fancy technology or unlimited resources. The holographic display showed the trapped ship again, and Tay could see small figures moving around inside it through transparent walls. Real people or real aliens were depending on him to save their lives. The thought was both terrifying and strangely familiar. The command center was filled with lights and sounds that hurt Tay's eyes and ears. Dozens of screens showed numbers and symbols that moved too fast for him to follow. Alien machines that looked like giant metal flowers hummed and clicked in corners of the room. The air smelled like electricity and something sweet that reminded him of burning plastic. Dr. Yoon sat at a desk covered with headphones and microphones that were connected to a machine the size of a refrigerator. She was a young woman with tired eyes who had been working as a translator between humans and the Kepler for 3 months. Her job was to turn the aliens' strange clicking and whistling sounds into Korean words that humans could understand. Vi, Commander is speaking now, Dr. Yoon said, pressing the headphones against her ears. Her face was pale and worried as the alien sounds came through the machine. He says their ship has been trapped for 6 days. The crew is running out of air and food, but that is not the worst part. Tay moved closer to hear better. Around him, Korean and American military officers watched screens that showed the alien ship spinning slowly inside the dark storm. The vessel looked like a silver needle surrounded by purple and black clouds that moved like living things. What is the worst part? Colonel Lee asked quietly. Dr. Yoon listened to more clicking sounds before answering. Their ship contains research about something called the Darkness Eaters. These are creatures that travel between galaxies and destroy everything they find. The research shows how to stop them, but if the ship is destroyed, millions of worlds will die when the Darkness Eaters arrive. The 3-dimensional display in the center of the room showed a detailed image of the void storm. It looked like a hurricane made of shadows and lightning, but Tay could see that it moved in patterns that reminded him of something familiar. The dark tentacles reached out and grabbed at the trapped ship like fingers trying to crush an egg. How many rescue attempts have failed? Tay asked. A Kepler scientist answered through Dr. Yoon's translation equipment. The alien's voice sounded like wind blowing through broken glass. 47 attempts. We have lost 12 ships and 300 volunteers. Every time we send advanced technology into the storm, it becomes stronger. Our energy weapons feed it power. Our force fields are turned against us. Tay walked around the display, studying the storm from every angle. It reminded him of his days in Afghanistan, when he had to figure out how to disarm bombs that were designed to kill anyone who tried to touch them. The insurgents who built those devices were smart. They knew that bomb disposal experts would use metal detectors, so they made bombs with wooden triggers. They knew soldiers would use robots, so they built pressure plates that only activated under human weight. The insurgents in Afghanistan taught me something important, Tay said, not taking his eyes off the spinning storm. When your enemy expects you to use advanced technology, sometimes the best weapon is something simple and old. He asked for a piece of paper and a pencil. The request seemed strange in a room full of alien computers, but Colonel Lee found what he needed. Tay sat on the floor and began drawing rough sketches, while the sophisticated machines hummed around him. What if we do not fight the storm at all? He said, drawing circles and waves on the paper. What if we work with it instead? The Kepler Scientists made sounds that Dr. Yoon translated as confused and angry protests. They say that is impossible. The void storm destroys everything that enters it. There is no way to work with it. But Tae was remembering something from his childhood. His grandfather had been a musician who played traditional Korean instruments. The old man had taught him about resonance, how one vibrating object could make another object vibrate at the same frequency. "Look at how the storm moves," Tae said, pointing at his simple drawings. "It has a rhythm, like music. Every few seconds, the dark tentacles pull back before they grab again. The lightning follows. A pattern. What if we could match that pattern?" He drew more circles on the paper showing how sound waves worked. "My grandfather showed me how to make a wine glass sing by rubbing the rim with a wet finger. The glass vibrates at its natural frequency. What if this storm has a natural frequency too?" Colonel Lee knelt down next to Tae and looked at his rough sketches. Her eyes lit up with understanding. "During the Korean War, our forces used psychological warfare tactics. We would play loud music to confuse enemy communications. Sometimes the simple solutions work better than complex ones." The Kepler scientists were making agitated sounds through the translation equipment. Dr. Yoon looked embarrassed as she translated their words. "They say this is primitive thinking. They have computers that can calculate billions of frequencies per second. If resonance could work, they would have discovered it already." But Tae was already moving toward the radio equipment in the corner of the room. "Their computers are trying to fight the storm with force. What if we try to talk to it instead? What if we send simple radio waves that match its natural rhythm?" He started adjusting dials on an old military radio that looked ancient compared to the alien technology around it. The radio had been built in the 1970s and used vacuum tubes instead of computer chips. It was the kind of equipment that Tae had learned to repair during his army training. "The storm feeds on complex energy," Tae explained as he worked. "But this radio only produces simple sine waves. Maybe it will not see these waves as food." The room became quiet except for the humming of machines and the soft static from the old radio. Everyone watched as Tae slowly tuned the frequency, matching the rhythm he had observed in the storm's movements. On the main display, the void storm continued to spin around the trapped alien ship. But something subtle was beginning to change in the way the dark tentacles moved. The Kepler ship emerged from the void storm like a silver fish jumping out of dark water. Tae watched through the command center's main screen as the alien vessel slowly moved away from the swirling darkness that had held it prisoner for 6 days. The simple radio waves from the old military equipment had worked like a key in a lock, creating a safe path through the storm's violent energy. But as the rescued ship docked with the Kepler mother vessel, the alien crew brought news that made everyone in the command center fall silent. The ship's commander was a tall creature with 4 arms and eyes that glowed like blue stars. When he spoke through Dr. Yoon's translation equipment, his voice carried fear that needed no translation. "The void storms are not natural disasters," Dr. Yoon repeated the alien's words with a shaking voice. "They are weapons. Living weapons created by something called the Void Hunters." Captain Jang Ho, a pilot who had flown combat missions over North Korea for 30 years, leaned forward in his chair. His weathered face showed the same expression he wore when enemy missiles were locked onto his aircraft. "What are these Void Hunters?" The alien commander's response came through the translation equipment like a ghost story told around a campfire. "They are older than most stars. They travel from galaxy to galaxy, consuming everything they find, not just planets or people, but entire civilizations. They eat knowledge, technology, and progress itself." The main display changed to show images that the rescued Kepler ship had recorded. Tae saw the ruins of cities that had once reached toward the sky, but now lay broken like scattered toys. Massive space stations hung dark and empty in the void, their lights extinguished forever. Entire solar systems showed nothing but cold rocks where living worlds had once orbited their suns. "How many civilizations have they destroyed?" Colonel Lee asked quietly. "Thousands," came the translated answer. "Maybe tens of thousands. We have found the remains of empires that were building machines to reshape galaxies. All of them fell to the Void Hunters. The pattern is always the same." Dr. Yoon paused as she listened to more clicking and whistling from the alien commander. When she spoke again, Her face was pale. The Void Hunters study each civilization before they attack. They learn how the target species thinks, how their technology works, how their society is organized. Then they create weapons specifically designed to turn that civilization's greatest strengths against itself. Captain Jiang Ho scratched his chin thoughtfully, like how we used the enemy's own minefields against them during the war, turn their defenses into traps. Exactly, the alien commander confirmed through the translator. The more advanced a civilization becomes, the more vulnerable they are. The Void Hunters create viruses that infect artificial intelligence systems. They build energy drains that feed on fusion reactors. They deploy psychological weapons that drive entire species insane through their own communication networks. Tay was beginning to understand something that made his stomach feel cold. That is why the Void Storm got stronger every time you used advanced technology to fight it. The Hunters designed it to eat the kind of weapons you would naturally use. The alien commander made a sound that Dr. Yoon translated as bitter laughter. Yes, every time we sent our most sophisticated rescue ships, the storm became more powerful. Our energy weapons fed it. Our computer systems were turned against us. We were making ourselves weaker with every attempt. But the simple radio waves worked, Colonel Lee said. They worked because the Hunters never expected anyone to use such primitive technology. The display changed again to show a map of the galaxy with red dots marking the locations of Void Hunter attacks. There were hundreds of red dots, and they were slowly moving in a pattern that pointed toward one small blue dot at the edge of the spiral arm. "Earth?" Captain Jiang Ho said quietly. "The Hunters are coming here," Dr. Yoon translated. "Their advanced scouts have been studying human civilization for decades. They are preparing weapons designed specifically to destroy us. But there is something they did not expect." Tay looked around the command center at the mixture of human and alien technology. Old Korean War-era radios sat next to machines that could calculate the movement of stars. Simple paper maps were spread on tables next to holographic displays that showed the structure of space itself. "They expected us to be like every other advanced civilization," he said, understanding flooding through him like sunrise. "They thought we would rely completely on our most sophisticated technology. But we still remember how to fight with simple weapons." The alien commander's next words came through the translator with something that sounded almost like hope. "Human military history is unique in the galaxy. Most species abandon primitive warfare as soon as they develop advanced weapons. But humans have continued to study and practice asymmetric tactics even after developing nuclear weapons and space travel. Over the next several days, the underground command center became a war college unlike anything that had ever existed. Alien generals with brains the size of watermelons sat next to human sergeants who had learned their tactics in rice paddies and mountain caves. Species that could manipulate gravity and bend light listened carefully as Kim Tae explained how Korean War veterans had held defensive positions using nothing but sandbags and determination. "The enemy expects you to fight like an advanced civilization," Tae told a room full of creatures that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. "So we fight like primitives instead." Captain Jiang Ho spread out maps showing the terrain around Seoul and began explaining how to use mountains and rivers as weapons against an enemy that controlled the sky. "Superior technology means nothing if you cannot bring it to bear on your target. The Void Hunters were coming to destroy humanity's advanced civilization, but they were about to discover that humans had never forgotten how to fight dirty." The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a cathedral made of crystal and starlight. Representatives from hundreds of worlds sat in floating chairs that moved silently through the air, their different shapes and colors creating a rainbow of alien life. At the center of it all, Kim Tae stood at a speaking platform that felt impossibly small beneath the vast dome above his head. He reached into his pocket and touched the piece of paper he kept there. It was not actually a dollar bill that Park Min had given him 6 months ago on that rainy Seoul street. Instead, it was a small note the actor had written later, after the battle was won. The note simply said, "I knew you were special from the first moment I saw you." Tae had kept it as a reminder of how one person's kindness could change the fate of entire worlds. The Void Hunters had come to Earth expecting to find another advanced civilization that would crumble under their sophisticated attacks. They had prepared weapons designed to turn human technology against itself, computer viruses that could infect the global internet, energy drains that would feed on nuclear power plants, psychological warfare programs that would drive people insane through their own television and radio broadcasts. But the Void Hunters had made a critical mistake. They had studied human civilization for decades, but they had only looked at humanity's most advanced achievements. They had seen the space stations and the nuclear weapons and the global communication networks. They had not bothered to study the lessons humans had learned in foxholes and jungle clearings and mountain caves. When the invasion began, the Void Hunters found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to behave like an advanced civilization. Human resistance fighters abandoned their cities and disappeared into forests and mountains, just like Korean War veterans had done 70 years earlier. They used simple weapons that the alien technology could not detect or counter. They communicated through hand signals and written messages instead of radio waves that could be intercepted. Tae had commanded the defense of the Asian theater from a bunker built into the mountains north of Seoul. His headquarters looked more like a Korean War museum than a modern military facility. Maps were drawn on paper with colored pencils. Communications were carried by human messengers on motorcycles. Weapons were built in village workshops using techniques that were hundreds of years old. The Void Hunters had never faced an enemy that fought this way. Their advanced sensors could not track armies that moved like guerrillas through familiar terrain. Their energy weapons were useless against fighters who attacked from hidden positions and then disappeared before a counterattack could be organized. Their psychological warfare programs failed completely because the human resistance fighters were not connected to the global networks that the aliens were trying to corrupt. Most importantly, the Void Hunters had not expected humans to refuse to surrender, even when the situation seemed hopeless. Every other civilization they had conquered had eventually given up when their advanced technology failed them. But humans had a long history of fighting impossible battles and somehow finding a way to win. The turning point had come during the Battle of Pusan Perimeter, named after the famous Korean War defense that had saved South Korea from invasion 70 years earlier. Tae had led a combined force of human and alien fighters in a last-ditch defense of the space elevator that connected Earth to the orbital shipyards above. Using tactics copied directly from the 1950 battle, the defenders had held a small area around the space elevator, while Void Hunter forces surrounded them completely. For 3 weeks they had fought with weapons that were deliberately simple and primitive. Rocket-propelled grenades built in garage workshops, sniper rifles that used mechanical scopes instead of electronic targeting systems, booby traps made from farming equipment and household chemicals. The Void Hunters had thrown everything they had at the defenders, but nothing worked. Their advanced weapons were designed to counter advanced defenses, not simple trenches and sandbags. Their tactical computers could not predict the movements of an enemy that made decisions based on human intuition instead of mathematical calculations. In the end, the Void Hunters had retreated in confusion, defeated by an enemy that refused to fight by the rules they understood. The ancient predators had consumed thousands of civilizations, but they had never encountered a species that could win wars with determination and improvised weapons. Now, 6 months later, representatives from across the galaxy were asking Earth to teach them the secrets of asymmetric warfare. The Galactic Council was offering humanity a permanent position as military advisors and strategists, species that had been building starships when humans were still learning to make fire, wanted to learn how to fight like Korean War veterans. Colonel Lee Sung watched from the observation deck as the Council voted to accept Earth as a full member. She thought about the homeless veteran who had been sitting in the rain just 6 months ago, asking for spare change. Now he was commanding space fleets and teaching alien generals how to win impossible battles. In his apartment in Seoul, Park, Min watched the ceremony on television with tears in his eyes. He had acted in dozens of movies about heroes and soldiers, but he had never imagined that his simple act of kindness to a homeless veteran would lead to this moment. The man he had helped was now saving entire worlds. As the ceremony ended and the representatives from hundreds of worlds applauded, Tay touched the note in his pocket one more time. The greatest victory had not been won with advanced technology or superior firepower. It had been won by recognizing that even the most desperate person might have something valuable to offer, if someone was willing to listen with respect instead of pity.